Mr. Speaker, if he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then, Mr. Speaker, if he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then,
I'll decide when there's more.
Mr. Speaker, until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business. His employment secretary, I don't see her here, she wants more young people in work. But businesses say they are cutting jobs because of the Chancellor's budget. His Deputy Prime Minister, she is not here. Her employment rights bill will stop businesses hiring. That's what they say. The CBI said on Monday that the dots of the government's policy don't join up. They're right, aren't they?
Mr. Speaker, on Monday she said that she wouldn't reverse the increase in national insurance. Yesterday, on their legacy legislation, their predecessor, they couldn't decide what their position was. Today, they've launched a policy commission asking other people to give them some ideas for government. And she talks about a petition. We had a massive petition on the 4th of July in this country. We spent years taking our party from a party of protest to a party of government. They're hurtling in the opposite direction.
Kemi Badenoch.
What a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. We had a budget in March this year, and tractors were not blockading the streets of Whitehall afterwards. So let me give him another example of a real business. Following his budget, the head of McVitie's has said that it has been harder to understand what the case for investment in the UK is. So while the Prime Minister has been hobnobbing in Brazil, businesses have been struggling to digest his budget. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that the Employment Rights Bill shows that it is not only the ginger nut that is causing him problems?
Kemi Badenoch, during Prime Minister's questions, did not hold back in her damning criticism of Keir Starmer, calling for his resignation with a fiery urgency. Her words weren't just political posturing, they were a visceral expression of frustration and disbelief at his leadership. Badenoch accused Starmer of being completely out of his depth, a man more preoccupied with optics and sound bites than the real hard work of governing. Her disdain was palpable, as she painted him as a leader who has not only failed to deliver, but has actively made life harder for the very people he claims to represent. Badenoch did not mince words, pointing to a shocking petition signed by millions calling for Starmer to resign, a clear sign of how out of touch he was with the public mood. She portrayed him as a leader who had run a government rife with contradictions and incapable of delivering coherent policies. Businesses were cutting jobs and scaling back investment, she said, not because of global challenges, but because Starmer's government had failed to create the environment in which growth could take place. It is not governments that create growth. It is businesses, she declared, her voice cutting through the chamber as she blamed him for the economic slowdown. Her criticism was not limited to policy. Badenoch took aim at Starmer's character, pointing to his tendency to shirk responsibility, to duck rather than confront issues head-on. He is someone who has no idea how things work, she said bluntly, in a sentence that seemed to sum up her entire argument. For Badenoch, Starmer's shortcomings were not just political, but personal. He lacked the conviction, the decisiveness, and the vision to lead. His administration, she argued, had become synonymous with chaos and indecision, lurching from crisis to crisis without a clear direction. But the most striking element of Badenoch's criticism was her raw passion. This was not a rehearsed speech or a calculated attack. It was a heartfelt plea for better leadership, for the country to escape the stagnation and incompetence that she believed Starmer embodied. Her words left no doubt about her position. Keir Starmer must go, and the sooner the better. For Badenoch, this is not just a matter of politics, it is about the future of the United Kingdom, and in her eyes, Starmer stands in the way.
I was attending the G20. I suspect on their current trajectory, they don't know whether they're going to attend the G20 or not. Maybe the Policy Commission will come up with an answer on that one. But we've had record investment from overseas investment into this country. And she keeps carping from the sidelines. She says at this dispatch book, she wants all the benefits of the budget, all the investment, but she doesn't want to pay for any of it. Mr. Speaker, she's racked up £6.7 billion of unfunded commitments in just 3 weeks as leader of the opposition. So once it comes to the economy, we're the ones growing the economy.
Mr. Speaker, the investment he's taking credit for was our work. I was business secretary. We negotiated those deals that he announced. But the bottom line is that in all that he has said, he doesn't seem to care about the young people who will lose their jobs as a result of his budget. Perhaps he can show more concern for the 1,100 people who found out yesterday that they could lose their jobs at Vauxhall's plant in Luton. So while he flies around making unilateral commitments, back home, the real-world effects are businesses closing in Bedfordshire and Basildon. Does the Prime Minister stand by his promise to ban the sale of petrol cars by 2030, even if more jobs will be...
Keir Starmer's defense of his leadership at Marquez was a hollow and out-of-touch display, emblematic of a leader more focused on global appearances than on solving the pressing issues at home. His boast about attending the G20 summit reeked of self-importance, as though his presence alone was enough to justify the struggles of businesses and workers back in the UK. Yet the real story, as Kemi Badenoch pointed out, lies not in his international photo ops, but in the devastating domestic consequences of his government's failures. Starmer's attempt to take credit for record investment from overseas was promptly dismantled, with Badenoch revealing that these achievements stemmed from deals she negotiated during her tenure as business secretary, not from any effort by Starmer's administration. This revelation paints Starmer not as a visionary leader, but as a hollow opportunist, desperate to claim the fruits of others' labor while ignoring the reality of his policy failures. Badenoch's critique of the Prime Minister's priorities was scathing. While Starmer was busy attending summits and making unilateral commitments on the international stage, businesses in the UK were collapsing under the weight of his government's incompetence. The closure of plants like Vauxhall, which left thousands of workers facing joblessness, is a stark reminder of the disconnect between Starmer's rhetoric and the actual impact of his policies. Badenoch's focus on these workers highlighted a key point. Starmer's government seems more concerned with theoretical achievements than with protecting livelihoods. Nowhere is this disconnect more evident than in Starmer's rigid commitment to banning the sale of petrol cars by 2030. While the policy may sound progressive on paper, its real-world implications are devastating. Badenoch's criticism rightly exposed the policy as a reckless gamble, sacrificing thousands of jobs in industries unprepared for such a rapid transition. Starmer's inability or unwillingness to address these consequences reveals a leader whose priorities lie in appeasing international audiences rather than addressing the concerns of his constituents. Badenoch's critique was not just a condemnation of Starmer's policy failures. It was an indictment of his leadership style. His reliance on empty platitudes and borrowed successes, combined with his refusal to confront the realities of his decisions, paints the picture of a prime minister woefully unfit for the challenges of his role. Under his watch, businesses are failing, workers are losing their jobs, and the economy is stagnating. Far from leading the UK into a brighter future, Starmer seems content to let the country flounder as long as he can polish his international image. Badenoch's criticism laid bare the uncomfortable truth. Keir Starmer is a leader more focused on optics than outcomes, and his tenure is proving disastrous for the United Kingdom.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't normally invite a heckle, but that one was accurate. Mr. Speaker, the question of the position of jobs in Luton is a very serious one, and families and workers will be very worried, and we are obviously engaging with them. I would remind the Leader of the Opposition that the EV mandates that are an issue in this particular case were actually introduced by the last government. I would also remind her that she was the business secretary that introduced them. We're getting on with supporting those communities. She's shouting from the sidelines.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly didn't read his briefing about the EV mandate. The fact is, we changed the date and made it easier for people. Everything he has done is attack people. The budget was an attack on farmers, an attack on workers, an attack on pensioners, an attack on the young, and an attack on thousands of charities and businesses across the country. The whole system is broken, Mr. Speaker, and he is making things worse. He is making things worse.
Their constituents will be affected.
Mr. Speaker, he is making things worse. Everyone is unhappy. Isn't it a good thing that the Chancellor is an expert at customer complaints?
Keir Starmer's response to the pressing concerns about job losses in London during Prime Minister's questions revealed a leader disconnected from the realities facing workers and their families. Instead of offering practical solutions or demonstrating accountability, Starmer resorted to deflecting blame onto previous governments, avoiding any responsibility for his administration's shortcomings. His reference to engaging with communities sounded more like a weak excuse than a genuine commitment, offering little reassurance to those grappling with the consequences of his government's flawed policies. Kemi Badenoch's reply exposed the lack of depth and urgency in Starmer's approach, delivering a sharp critique of his priorities and decision-making. She pointed out the real harm caused by his government's actions, highlighting how his economic strategies have strained nearly every corner of society. Farmers, workers, pensioners, young people, charities, and businesses are all bearing the brunt of policies that seem disconnected from the needs of those they claim to serve. Badenoch's analysis painted a bleak picture of an administration that promises progress but delivers hardship, further alienating the very people it is supposed to support. Perhaps most damning was Badenoch's assertion that Starmer is actively exacerbating the country's challenges. His leadership, characterized by inconsistent policies and a failure to anticipate the impact of his decisions, has deepened the difficulties faced by communities across the UK. The remark about the Chancellor being more suited to handling customer complaints captured the essence of Starmer's governance: reactive, disorganized, and lacking the vision needed to address the nation's critical issues. Badenoch's critique left no doubt that Starmer's approach is not only ineffective but harmful, compounding problems rather than solving them and leaving the country with a leadership vacuum at a time when strong, decisive action is desperately needed. Thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts or opinions, feel free to share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more updates, and join us on Telegram for exclusive content and discussions. Your support means a lot.